The sprawling mansion at the edge of the bustling city seemed less like a home and more like a monument to fortune. Behind towering gates of black iron and gardens manicured to perfection lived a man whose very name could sway markets and seal the fate of corporations. His wealth was the kind that made others whisper in awe, his power the sort that inspired both envy and fear. But for all his glittering success, for all the crystal chandeliers and polished marble that decorated his life, he carried within him a wound deeper than money could ever mend. His daughter, whom we will call Elena, was believed to have been born blind. Doctors had declared it so when she was still a toddler. They examined her tiny eyes, tested her reactions, and delivered their verdict with professional certainty. She never followed the glow of a lamp, never reached for toys with the eagerness of sight, never met her father's gaze when he tried desperately to make her smile. That pronouncement became her reality, one her father accepted with crushing sorrow. The wealthy man, let us call him Mr. Harrington, blamed himself relentlessly. He had not been there when Elena came into the world, choosing instead to immerse himself in business dealings that built his empire. Her mother shouldered those fragile first months alone, and by the time Mr. Harrington tried to repair what he had neglected, the doctor's judgment had already been carved in stone. His only child, the one life he wished to cherish, would never see his face. The mansion, though filled with servants and staff, soon grew hollow. Its corridors echoed with footsteps but no laughter. Its grand rooms stood polished but joyless. Mr. Harrington, burdened with guilt, drowned himself in meetings, contracts, and acquisitions, while Elena wandered its halls in silence, dressed in beautiful gowns but clutching her stuffed animals like lifelines. The staff pitied her quietly, speaking in hushed tones, all accepting the doctor's word as unquestionable truth. Everyone believed it except one. Among the many who worked in the Harrington estate was a maid named Sophia. She was young, hardly more than 20, and carried the quiet dignity of someone who had known hardship all her life. She polished marble floors until her reflection stared back, dusted carved furniture worth more than her entire childhood home, and served meals she could never dream of affording. Yet within Sophia burned a light no poverty could extinguish. From the first day, she treated Elena not as a fragile patient to pity, but as a child deserving warmth, laughter, and friendship. It was in those small, tender exchanges that Sophia noticed something unusual, details everyone else seemed blind to. When she entered a room with a tray, Elena's head sometimes turned subtly before a sound was made. When Sophia arranged fresh flowers, Elena's gaze lingered a heartbeat longer on the colorful petals, as though she could sense their brightness. At once, when Sophia accidentally dropped a hairpin that glittered in the sunlight, Elena's eyes flickered downward. Following its fall, Sophia's heart raced at the possibility, but fear held her tongue. Who was she, a servant scraping together wages to send home to her younger siblings to question what doctors had said? Who was she to contradict the belief of a man as powerful as Mr. Harrington? Still, her instincts whispered louder each day. This girl can see, not perfectly perhaps, but she sees more than anyone realizes. Quietly, Sophia began to test her suspicion. She would place Elena's toys at different angles, noticing how the little girl reached directly for the one that gleamed in the shaft of sunlight. She polished silverware in the room, catching the faint narrowing of Elena's pupils when light bounced across them. Every sign deepened her conviction, but with it grew her fear. If she was mistaken, she risked losing her job, perhaps even being cast out in disgrace. Yet if she was right, then Elena's entire life had been built upon a tragic misunderstanding. The breaking point came one golden afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the mansion's enormous windows, bathing the playroom in warmth. Elena sat cross-legged on the rug in a crimson dress, her small hands clutching a stuffed bear. Gathering her courage, Sophia knelt beside her and gently shone a tiny torch, not directly, not harshly, but carefully across her face. And there was a spark, a flicker of light in Elena's eyes. Her pupils responded, her gaze shifted, and in that brief reflection Sophia found the proof she had prayed for. Her breath caught, her hands trembled. She isn't blind. She has been trapped inside a story that doesn't belong to her. Before Sophia could steady herself, footsteps echoed across the polished floor. The doorway filled with the imposing frame of Mr. Harrington, dressed sharply yet carrying an air of exhaustion. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Sophia kneeling with the torch. He froze. His daughter's face turned instinctively toward the light. Suspicion stormed across his expression until he saw what had been hidden all these years. Elena's eyes, wide and alive, followed the beam. The air grew heavy with silence. Sophia's heart pounded with dread. Had she destroyed everything with her boldness? But then Elena shattered the silence herself. A faint smile curved her lips as she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. "It's so bright." The words struck Mr. Harrington like a lightning bolt. For years, he had accepted blindness as fact, carrying it like a chain around his soul. To hear his daughter speak of brightness, to see her eyes respond, it was unthinkable, and yet undeniable. His knees weakened. For the first time in his life, the man of power felt utterly powerless. Sophia, trembling but steady in her resolve, spoke at last. She explained the signs she had noticed, the subtle reactions others had overlooked, the quiet experiment she had performed while going about her duties. She confessed her fear of speaking up, yet also her certainty. Eleanor was not blind, only misunderstood Dahmer. Harrington struggled to process it all. He remembered the grim pronouncements of doctors, the endless appointments that had ended in disappointment, the resignation he had wrapped around his heart like armor. How could an untrained maid see what professionals had missed? But there, before his own eyes, was truth undeniable. What followed that afternoon was nothing short of a storm, a whirlwind of doubt, hope, and urgent action. Dahmer, Harrington, still shaken by the moment in the playroom, wasted no time summoning new specialists, not the same doctors who had dismissed Elena years before with solemn faces and final words, but fresh voices, eager to look at her with open minds. Within days, the estate became a place of hushed anticipation, with medical experts arriving through the towering gates, carrying their instruments and guarded optimism. The test began. Lights were shown, patterns traced, colors displayed. Elena, once thought to live in perpetual darkness, reacted in ways that defied the old verdicts. Her vision was not whole. No, there were gaps, challenges, shadows, but it was not absent. She suffered from a rare condition that limited her sight, distorting rather than erasing it. With therapy, guidance, and the right treatment, there was hope her world could slowly brighten. For Mr. Harrington, the revelation was a crushing weight and a soaring relief all at once. Alone in his chambers, away from curious eyes, he wept, as he had not wept since boyhood. Years of guilt poured out, years in which he had allowed himself to believe his child lived in endless night. How many moments had he missed because he could not bear to hope? How many smiles had he lost because he had been too afraid to question? But now the truth was undeniable, and it had not been delivered by wealth or doctors or influence. It had been uncovered by Sophia, the maid who had chosen kindness over silence. Eleanor's progress began slowly, like the first rays of dawn after a long winter night. At first, she noticed shapes more clearly, the outline of her teddy bear, the shimmer of sunlight against polished floors. Weeks later, she began to distinguish colors. She laughed aloud the day she realized the bear she clutched was blue, not the dull gray she had always imagined. She marveled at the green of the garden leaves pressed against the window, as she squealed with delight at the golden warmth of sunlight spilling through lace curtains. Mr. Harrington transformed with her. He, who once measured his life by contracts and empires, began spending his days kneeling on the playroom rug, stacking wooden blocks into castles, guiding Eleanor's small hands as she dipped paintbrushes into bright colors. He read picture books aloud, pointing to illustrations, tears filling his eyes each time she named a color correctly. He laughed when she noticed the sparkle of his cufflinks, something so small, yet to him immeasurable in meaning. Yet one thought never left his mind. This miracle was not his doing, it was Sophia's. He tried to reward her the only way he knew how. He offered her riches, promotions, even the chance to leave service behind forever. But Sophia, humble and steadfast, asked only for one thing, that Eleanor continue to be surrounded by love, time, and patience, the treasures no fortune could purchase. She stayed on in the mansion, not because she needed the work, but because she had grown into something more than a servant. She had become a sister figure to Eleanor, a trusted friend who guided her with gentleness. The mansion itself began to change. Where once silence had reigned, laughter now rang down the marble halls. Music floated through the rooms, Eleanor's giggles echoing like bells. Servants, who once walked like shadows, found themselves smiling at the sound of joy returning to the household. Even the grand chandeliers seemed to shine brighter, as if reflecting the renewed spirit of their home. Word of Elena's transformation spread quietly at first. Neighbors whispered it, then shopkeepers, then strangers across the city. The story became legend. The wealthy man's daughter, long thought blind, who discovered her sight thanks not to fortune or fame, but to the heart of a maid, who refused to turn away from truth. People repeated it in markets, in cafes, in crowded trains, and with every retelling, the story became less about wealth and more about Hope Dotmer. Harrington, once a figure defined by power, found himself transformed in the eyes of others. He was no longer merely the magnate who owned towers of glass and steel, but a father who had learned what it meant to cherish. His worth was no longer measured by the contracts he signed, but by the light in his daughter's eyes when she ran into his arms. Evenings in the Harrington mansion changed from hollow gatherings to moments of tenderness. The dining table, once a place of formal silence, now hosted stories, laughter, and little drawings Elena proudly displayed. Sometimes she painted rainbows with Sophia. Colors smudged across the paper in joyful chaos, and she would hold them up to her father with shining eyes. "Do you see it?" she would ask, and his heart would ache with gratitude as he whispered, "Yes, my love, I see it." Sophia, though she never sought recognition, became the quiet heroine of the household. To Elena, she was not merely the maid, but the guardian angel who had given her the gift of vision. To Mr. Harrington, she was a reminder that courage and compassion are treasures beyond gold. And so, the mansion on the city's edge no longer stood as a cold monument to wealth. It became a home alive with warmth, where a father rediscovered love, a child discovered the colors of her world, and a maid proved that kindness has the power to rewrite destiny. The Harrington estate, once a hollow palace of stone and silence, now breathed with life. Yet the greatest change was not in the walls or the echoing corridors, it was in the hearts of those who lived within them. Elena's world blossomed with each passing month. Her progress was not without struggle. There were days when frustration welled up in her, when blurred images made her cry or colors overwhelmed her senses. But in those moments, the figures never wavered. Her father and Sophia Dotmer. Harrington learned patience in ways business had never taught him. He discovered that true success was not measured in profit margins, but in the courage to sit beside his daughter when she struggled to trace a shape, or when she confused green for blue. He praised her every effort, not her perfection. He learned to laugh at spilled paint and embrace the beauty of crooked rainbows. Sophia, too, became more than a helper. She became Elena's anchor. She sat with her through long therapy sessions, holding her hand when exercises grew difficult. She encouraged her when her confidence faltered, telling her stories of her own childhood struggles, weaving hope into every word. In Sophia's presence, Elena was never afraid to stumble because she knew someone believed in her completely. As the months stretched into a year, Elena's growth astonished even the specialists. She could recognize her father's face, tracing his features with her eyes instead of just her hands. She pointed out details with delight: the shine of his watch, the curve of his smile, the softness of his eyes when he looked at her. For Mr. Harrington, each moment was a gift beyond measure. The story of the Harrington family's transformation continued to ripple through the city. People who had never stepped inside the mansion spoke of it with awe. They repeated it not as gossip, but as a tale of resilience and compassion. Strangers found inspiration in the idea that truth can hide in unexpected places, and that kindness, even from the humblest heart, can achieve what money and status cannot. Journalists eventually heard of Elena's journey. A local newspaper ran a quiet feature, written with tenderness rather than sensationalism, about the girl who had been given a second chance to see. The article praised not the wealth of the Harrington name, but the devotion of a servant whose courage changed everything. Readers wept over their morning coffee, touched by the reminder that the smallest act of faith could open the widest doors. For Mr. Harrington, this publicity mattered little. What mattered most was what he found waiting for him at the end of each day. Elena's laughter filling the halls, her footsteps racing to greet him, her little arms thrown around his waist. He had once been a man admired and feared in boardrooms, but in his daughter's embrace, he discovered a kind of power no empire could rival: the power of love. Even the household staff changed. Where once their tasks had been performed in silence, now they shared smiles and laughter. They decorated Elena's playroom with bright colors and filled the gardens with flowers chosen for their vibrancy. The estate that had once felt like a mausoleum became a place of celebration, not of wealth, but of life. And Sophia, she remained a quiet soul at the heart of it all. She did not accept Mr. Harrington's offers of wealth or comfort beyond her needs. Instead, she continued her work with steady hands and a humble spirit. To Elena, she became more than family. She was the sister she had never had, the guardian who saw what no one else would. To Mr. Harrington, she became the living reminder that kindness is the truest form of wealth. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of rose and violet, the three of them sat together on the mansion's wide balcony. Elena leaned against her father's side, holding a crayon drawing of the garden below. Her lines were uneven, her colors bold and slightly mismatched, but her eyes sparkled with pride. "Do you see it, Papa?" she asked softly. Dahmer. Harrington swallowed the lump in his throat, brushing a tear from his cheek as he smiled. "Yes, my darling, I see it perfectly." Sophia, watching quietly, felt her own eyes fill with tears. She had never set out to change anyone's destiny. She had only followed her heart, refusing to ignore what others dismissed. And yet, by doing so, she had helped rewrite an entire family's story. The Harrington mansion at the city's edge no longer stood as a symbol of wealth alone. It became something greater, a beacon of love, resilience, and the power of kindness. Passers-by looked at its towering gates and spoke not of riches, but of the little girl who learned to see, the father who learned to love, and the maid whose courage made it all possible. And perhaps that was the truest lesson of all, that in even the grandest halls, the richest treasure is not gold or power, but the simple, fearless choice to care. So, dear listener, if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Remember that no act of compassion is ever too small to matter. Sometimes, the greatest miracles are born not from wealth or fame, but from kindness, the one gift that multiplies when given away.